Hi everyone, welcome back. We've got a brand new story to share with you, so let's begin. My name is Harold, and my 15 years of marriage ended with a revelation that shattered everything I thought I knew about trust and love. Lauren and I met in our mid-20s when we were both starting our careers. She was working in the finance department at a pharmaceutical company, and I was climbing the ladder in the healthcare administration field. We had this easy chemistry from the start, shared values about work and family, and similar dreams about building a stable, comfortable life together. The first few years of our marriage were everything I'd hoped for. We bought our first house together, traveled when we could afford it, and supported each other through career changes and challenges. Lauren was ambitious and driven, qualities I admired about her. She eventually moved to a larger pharmaceutical company where she worked her way up to senior management in their regulatory affairs division. I found my niche in hospital administration, eventually becoming the director of operations at a mid-sized regional medical center. The work was demanding but rewarding, and Lauren and I both understood the pressures that came with responsible positions. We made a good team, or so I thought. Looking back now, I can see the signs that things started changing around year 10 of our marriage. Lauren became more distant, more critical of small things I did or didn't do. She'd come home from work stressed and wouldn't want to talk about her day anymore. When I tried to plan date nights or weekend trips, she'd find reasons why the timing wasn't right or why she was too busy with work projects. I thought it was because of the natural ups and downs of a long marriage. We were both in our late 30s, dealing with more responsibility at work, and maybe we'd fallen into some comfortable routines that weren't as exciting as they used to be. I figured we'd work through it like we always had. Lauren had always been social at work, but around year 12, she started mentioning a new executive who joined her company. His name was Michael, and according to Lauren, he was this brilliant strategist who was helping reshape their regulatory approach. She'd bring up things he'd said in meetings, his ideas about industry trends, or funny stories from team lunches. At first, I was actually happy that Lauren seemed energized by her work again. She'd been in a kind of boring routine, and having a colleague who challenged her thinking seemed like a positive thing. Michael was married with 2 kids, so there wasn't any reason for concern about their professional relationship. But slowly, Michael started coming up in conversation more and more. Lauren would mention staying late to work on projects with him or going to industry conferences where he was presenting. She'd get texts during dinner that she'd check immediately, apologizing and saying it was something urgent from the office. The change in Lauren's behavior became more noticeable. She started giving more attention to her appearance, which wasn't necessarily bad, but it was different from the person I'd been married to for over a decade. What really started bothering me was how Lauren seemed to lose interest in spending time with me. She'd rather work late than come home for dinner. Weekends became about catching up on things she'd missed during the week rather than doing things together. When I'd suggest we take a vacation or even just go out for an evening, she'd say she was too busy or too tired. The distance between us grew wider as the months went by, but I didn't know what to do about it. When I tried to talk to her about feeling disconnected from her, she'd get defensive and say I was being needy or not understanding the pressures she was under at work. She'd turn conversations around to make me feel like I was the one with unrealistic expectations. I kept thinking things would get better, that whatever phase Lauren was going through would pass, and we'd find our way back to being close again. I loved her, and I thought she loved me, even if she wasn't showing it the way she used to. But then I came to know something I would have never expected. Lauren's best friend from college, Janet, had remained close to both of us throughout our marriage. She was someone Lauren talked to about everything, and someone I'd always liked and trusted. Janet worked as a nurse practitioner and had this honest way about her that I respected. One evening, Janet called and asked if she could come over to talk to me about something important. Lauren was out of town at a conference, which I later realized was probably why Janet chose that timing. When she arrived, she looked uncomfortable and nervous, which was unusual for someone normally so direct and confident. Janet sat down in our living room and took a deep breath before she started talking. She told me that Lauren had been talking to her about having feelings for someone at work, someone who was more than just a colleague. According to Janet, Lauren had admitted to having an emotional affair that had become physical, and she was torn about what to do because she didn't want to hurt me but felt like she was in love with this other man. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My first reaction was complete denial. I told Janet that there must be some misunderstanding, that Lauren might be going through a difficult time, but she wouldn't cheat on me. We'd been together for 15 years. We'd built a life together. Yes, things had been boring lately, but having an affair wasn't something Lauren would do. Janet looked at me with this mixture of sadness and frustration. She said she'd been struggling with whether to tell me for months because she knew how much it would hurt, but she couldn't stand watching me be betrayed anymore. She said Lauren had been asking her for advice about whether to leave me for Michael, and Janet couldn't be part of that conversation without me knowing what was really happening. Even with what Janet told me, I still found myself making excuses for Lauren in my mind. Maybe she'd developed a crush on this colleague, but hadn't actually acted on it. Maybe Janet had misunderstood what Lauren was telling her. I thanked Janet for caring enough to tell me, but I said I needed to process what she'd shared and figure out how to approach my wife about it. Janet looked disappointed, but said she understood and that she hoped I'd be careful and take care of myself no matter what I decided to do. After she left, I spent the whole night lying awake, replaying the last few years of my marriage in my mind. All those late nights at work, the business trips, the phone calls and texts that Lauren would take in another room, the way she'd become so distant and critical of me. The pieces started fitting together in a way that made my stomach hurt, but I still didn't want to believe it. When Lauren came home from her conference, I watched her more carefully than I ever had before. I noticed how she'd check her phone constantly, how she'd smile at certain messages before quickly putting the phone away. It was like she was living a separate life that I wasn't part of. I knew I couldn't talk to Lauren based on what her friend had told me alone. If I were wrong, it would damage our marriage even more than it already was damaged. If I were right, Lauren would probably just deny everything and become more careful about hiding whatever's going on. So, I needed to get to know the truth some other way. After weeks of internal debate, I decided to hire a private investigator. I found an investigator through a lawyer friend who specialized in matrimonial cases and had a good reputation for being discreet and thorough. I gave the investigator Lauren's schedule and information about her work. I felt sick about the whole thing, but I knew I couldn't continue living in this uncertainty. If Lauren were faithful and I were wrong about everything, then maybe the investigator would help me see that, and I could work on rebuilding trust in our marriage. If she wasn't faithful, then I needed to know that too. 3 weeks later, the investigator called and asked to meet with me. When we did, I got a folder with photographs, documents, and a detailed timeline that left no room for doubt about what had been happening. It turned out that Lauren and Michael had been having an affair for a long time. The investigator had photos of them entering and leaving hotels together, evidence of trips they'd taken together that Lauren had told me were solo work conferences, and other things that supported the fact that they were sneaking around. The investigator had also gathered information about Michael's background. He was 42, had been married to his wife Gloria for 16 years, and had 2 sons who were 12 and 14. He'd been with Lauren's company for 3 years, which meant the affair had probably started not long after he'd been hired. He lived in an upscale neighborhood about 30 minutes from our house, and according to public records, he and his wife owned their home jointly. Looking at those photographs was one of the most painful experiences of my life. Seeing Lauren laughing and holding hands with another man, seeing her be affectionate and intimate with someone who wasn't me. It was like watching 15 years of marriage crumble in real time. But along with the heartbreak, I tried to see the light ahead. All those months of feeling like I was losing my mind, wondering why she had become so distant and critical, questioning whether I was being too needy in wanting to feel connected to my wife. None of that had been about me at all. She had checked out of our marriage because she was investing her emotional and physical energy elsewhere. The investigator had also provided me with information about Gloria, Michael's wife. She was a high school teacher who coached the debate team and volunteered with a local animal rescue. She and Michael had been together since college, and from what the investigator could determine, she had no idea about her husband's affair. As I drove home that evening, I kept thinking about Gloria. She was living the same lie I'd been living, trusting someone who was betraying that trust every day. She deserved to know the truth, just like I deserved to know it. I spent several days researching Gloria online, learning what I could about her. She had social media profiles that showed a normal, happy family life. Photos of her and Michael at their kids' sporting events, family vacations, celebrations of work achievements, and anniversaries. It looked like the life Lauren and I had once had, before everything became complicated and distant. I found Gloria's work email through the school district's website and sent her a message asking if she'd be willing to meet with me about something important regarding our spouses. I didn't want to reveal anything sensitive over email, but I wanted to give her the option to hear what I had to share. 2 days later, Gloria responded saying she'd be willing to meet, and we arranged to have coffee at a place. I brought copies of all the evidence the investigator had gathered, not knowing how much or how little Gloria might want to see. Meeting Gloria was both easier and harder than I'd expected. She was warm and straightforward, with this matter-of-fact way of speaking that reminded me of Janet. When I explained who I was and why I'd contacted her, I could see the recognition in her eyes. She'd probably had suspicions of her own that she'd been trying to ignore. I showed Gloria the timeline and some of the less intimate photographs, giving her the option to see everything or just the basic evidence of the affair. She chose to see it all, and I watched her face change as she processed what her husband had been doing. What surprised me was how quickly Gloria shifted from shock and hurt to what I can only describe as cold. She told me that this wasn't the first time Michael had cheated on her. Early in their marriage, she discovered he'd had a brief affair with a colleague at his previous company. He'd begged for forgiveness, promised it would never happen again, and she decided to give him another chance for the sake of their young children. Gloria said she'd spent years watching for signs that Michael might cheat again, but eventually she'd relaxed and tried to trust him. Finding out about Lauren felt like confirmation that Michael was never going to change, and this time she wasn't going to give him the opportunity to apologize. Before we left the coffee shop, Gloria told me she was going to contact a divorce attorney immediately. She said she was done protecting Michael from the consequences of his choices, and she was going to make sure that this affair cost him everything she legally could take. She thanked me for giving her the evidence, and said she hoped I'd find a way to move forward that brought me peace. That conversation with Gloria made me realize I'd been so focused on trying to save my marriage that I hadn't really considered what I wanted to happen if the marriage couldn't be saved. I decided not to confront Lauren immediately. Instead, I wanted to get my own legal situation sorted out first. I contacted a divorce attorney and began the process of understanding what a divorce would look like financially and practically. Now, Lauren and I didn't have children, which simplified some things, but we'd built significant shared assets over 15 years that would need to be divided. My attorney advised me to gather documentation of all our joint accounts, property, and investments before taking any action that might alert Lauren to my plans. He also added that having evidence of Lauren's affair might help in negotiations, particularly around alimony, depending on how Lauren chose to handle the divorce once she knew I was aware of her affair. During this period, I found myself becoming emotionally distant from Lauren in ways that she began to notice. I couldn't pretend to be affectionate with someone who was betraying me daily, and I stopped making efforts to bridge the gap between us. I was at this point absolutely done. Lauren noticed almost immediately and started asking if I was okay or if something was bothering me. I'd blame it on being tired or stressed about work, which seemed to satisfy her since she wasn't really invested in our relationship anyway. 3 weeks after my meeting with Gloria, she contacted me to say that she'd filed for divorce and would be serving Michael with papers the following day. She wanted to give me advance notice so I could be prepared for however Lauren might react when Michael told her what was happening. Gloria had decided to make the affair and divorce as public as possible. She told me after giving Michael the divorce papers that he had asked to keep everything private and settle things quietly, probably because he was worried about how public knowledge of his affair might affect his career and reputation. Gloria had refused and told him she wanted everyone to know exactly what kind of man he was. Lauren came home from work that evening acting strange. She was quiet and seemed distracted and looked worried. I watched her carefully, wondering if Michael had told her about being served with divorce papers. I decided this was the right time to talk to her about everything. I asked her if she was having a difficult day, if there was anything specific that was bothering her. She said everything was fine, just the usual work pressures. I asked her directly if she was upset because she and Michael had been caught having an affair. The look on Lauren's face was confirmation of everything I already knew. She started to deny it, started to ask what I was talking about, but I interrupted her and told her I had photographs, documentation, and a timeline of her affair. I showed her some of the evidence and told her I'd already consulted with a divorce attorney and would be filing papers within the week. Lauren broke down completely. She started crying and begging me to let her explain, saying the affair didn't mean anything, that she loved me and wanted to work things out. She said she'd been confused and made terrible mistakes, but she was willing to do whatever it took to save our marriage. I told Lauren that I'd already heard her explanations, and I wasn't interested in hearing different explanations now that she'd been caught. Lauren kept begging me for hours. She promised to quit her job, to never see Michael again, to go to counseling, and to do whatever I wanted to rebuild trust between us. But I realized that trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt after being so thoroughly destroyed. I told her I was done with our marriage, and I left the house to stay with my brother for a few days while I figured out the next steps. The divorce process took 8 months, longer than I'd hoped but not unusual for a case involving significant assets. Lauren fought everything, trying to delay proceedings and pushing for alimony despite having caused the breakdown of our marriage through her affair. During this time, Gloria kept me updated on her own divorce proceedings. Michael's case became public record when Gloria filed, and the affair became known among their social circle and professional networks. Gloria had been strategic about this, making sure that people who knew Michael professionally became aware of his pattern of infidelity and dishonesty. Gloria was awarded primary custody of their 2 sons, which meant Michael had to pay substantial child support in addition to spousal support. She also got their family home and most of their shared assets. Michael was left with his income, his car, and whatever he could fit in the small apartment he'd rented across town. About 6 months into our respective divorce proceedings, Gloria contacted me to tell me that she decided to send documentation of their affair to Lauren's company's Human Resources Department. The company where Lauren and Michael worked had strict policies about workplace relationships, particularly between executives and their subordinates. While Lauren and Michael weren't in a direct reporting relationship, their affair violated company policy about disclosure of romantic relationships. Both Lauren and Michael were suspended pending an internal investigation. Turns out, the company took these policies seriously. Lauren was suspended just as our divorce was being finalized. My attorney had managed to negotiate an agreement that gave me a fair share of our assets, without requiring me to pay alimony. 2 months after our divorce was finalized, both Lauren and Michael were terminated by their company. The internal investigation had concluded that their undisclosed relationship had influenced business decisions and created potential liability for the company. I felt a mixture of sadness and satisfaction about this. I was sad because I'd once loved Lauren and never wanted to see her life fall apart, even after what she'd done to our marriage. But I also felt like there was some justice in her experiencing real consequences for the choices that had hurt multiple people and families. Lauren has tried to reach out to me several times since our divorce was finalized. She sent emails apologizing for everything that happened and asking if we can find a way to be friends. She's mentioned struggling with unemployment, and I think she's hoping I'll offer some kind of support or forgiveness. I haven't responded to these messages. It's not that I hate Lauren or want her to suffer, but I also don't feel any obligation to help her rebuild her life after she chose to destroy our marriage. Forgiveness might come eventually, but I am not too sure about that either. Gloria and I have maintained a cordial relationship, checking in with each other occasionally about how we're both adjusting to our new lives. She seems to be doing well, focusing on her children and her career, and building a stable single life. Her boys are adjusting to their parents' divorce, and Gloria is making sure they maintain a relationship with their father despite her feelings about Michael's choices. I'm still working through the emotional aftermath of everything that happened. Some days, I feel angry about the years I spent trying to fix problems in my marriage that were caused by Lauren. Other days, I feel grateful that the truth came out before I spent even more years in a relationship that was built on a lie. I'm slowly building a new life that's focused on things and people that matter to me. I've reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with during the later years of my marriage. Dating feels like something I might be interested in eventually, but not anytime soon. Right now, I'm focused on understanding who I am as a single person after 15 years of being part of a couple. I want to make sure I'm healthy and whole before I consider sharing my life with someone new. I don't know what the future holds, but I know it will be built on honesty and self-respect in ways that my marriage ultimately wasn't. That's a foundation I can build on, even if it means starting over at an age when I thought my life was already settled and secure. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you opens the door to something better, even if you can't see it at the time.